Hi everybody, this is the presentation about the Bachelor of Science Honours Zoology degree. There's a talk on this site as well about the School of Biological Sciences and more particularly the biological subject group within that school. That's probably a good place to start if you haven't already seen it, because in this part of the school we offer 4 degree programs: Animal Behaviour and Welfare, Biological Sciences, Conservation Biology, and Zoology. And this talk is specifically about the Zoology degree. My name's Mike. I'm the program lead for Zoology, and this is a new degree that's starting this September in 2020. So we're excited to start this new degree. We have a lot of zoologists on our staff, and this seems like a really good place for us to fill in a gap, which is a specialist degree course about the science of animals. So if you've got to the stage of looking at zoology degree programs, you probably already know what zoology is. But just in case there's any misunderstandings, this is not really about studying animals in zoos. It's not really about zoos. But zoology shares a root with the word for zoo, and that is the Greek word for animal combined with the word for study. And so, as I said, zoology is really the study of animals. The idea has been around for a long time, several hundred years, but these days we have a modern definition of zoology, which is the scientific study of the behavior, structure, physiology, classification, and distribution of animals. So in a nutshell, that's the sort of thing you'll be learning about on a zoology degree program and what you will learn about if you study zoology at Plymouth. So it's about understanding the animal world around you, and if you're fascinated by animals and want to understand more about how they work from a scientific standpoint, this is probably the type of degree for you. These are the sorts of questions that zoologists as researchers think about, but also the sorts of things that you'll think about if you study zoology at undergraduate level. So, for example, we are interested in questions about why animals show certain kinds of behaviors, and a good example of that would be understanding why fish form schools, those really tightly packed groups of fish that swim around in coordinated movements, which I'm sure you've seen either in real life or on TV. Why do they do that? How do they form these schools? What's the benefit to the individuals within that school of being in the school? And how do they form those, or how do they perform those incredibly intricate, coordinated movements? So lots of interesting questions we can ask about fish, and partly we can do that by comparing them to birds, which also show very similar kinds of patterns, particularly things like starlings, for example, which form murmurations, huge flocks of birds flying in very coordinated patterns. What are the benefits of this kind of behavior? Where did it come from? Sticking with birds, we think about more mechanical aspects of animals as well, like, for example, how do birds fly? Most birds can fly, not all of them, but most birds can fly. And how do they do this? There's more than one answer to that because birds fly in different ways. Some birds find it extremely difficult to take off from the ground. Swifts, for example, find it very difficult to fly from the ground. Others are very good at it, of course. And birds are adapted to all kinds of different types of flight. So we have birds that are adapted for long soaring flights, like albatrosses, for example. We have birds that are adapted for incredibly fast flight, like hunting falcons, for example. What are the differences in the morphology of the wings, in the physiology of the birds, how they maintain or produce enough energy to carry out those high energy movements, for example. Wing shape and all the rest of it combine to allow birds to fly in all of these different ways. We think about taxonomic questions as well. So what exactly is a mammal? What do all mammals have in common that sets them apart from other groups of animals? How long have mammals been around for? How long have mammals been around for? And where do these different characteristics of mammals appear in the fossil record or in the history of the evolution of mammals? Why do we classify humans as mammals rather than a different taxonomic group, and so on? And then we think a lot about things like communication between individuals of the same species. So frogs obviously call in many species. They produce a very loud call, which is mainly for attracting females. But what is it that females are listening to? What is it that the frog call means that the female can take away from listening to that sound? Is it something to do with how often the male can call within a given time period? Is it the pitch of the call? Is it the loudness? And what are the costs to the male? Sitting there in the middle of a pond making a really loud noise attracts not only females, but also predators, parasites, and so on. How do males avoid that risk, or how do they balance that risk with the benefits of attracting lots of females? And animals differ in all sorts of different ways, and we'll think about things like why they look the way they do. So lots of animals like that frog, and lots of birds and fish are very brightly coloured. A lot of other species are not particularly brightly coloured. Why is that? Why are many mammals, for example, not particularly brightly coloured, but rather similar sort of brownish fur? Why are they the shape that they are? Why do they have the particular limbs that they have, fins or wings or legs? And why do they act? So we've talked about the different ways, a few of the different ways that animals act, but why do they all act in the different ways that they do? What are the similarities between species and the differences between species that can help us to understand why they act the way they do? Underpinning all of this is an understanding of where this diversity evolved from, so how this diversity has arisen through evolutionary processes. And zoology, like all biological degrees, is underpinned by a good understanding of evolution. And as you'll see in a minute, one of the first things that we investigate on the zoology degree program is a good understanding of evolution. So one of the core questions here is, how does all of this diversity evolve? What are the processes that lead to all of this amazing diversity in animal life? So if you do a zoology degree, what can you expect to gain from it? The broad picture here really is that we're trying to give you a scientific evidence-based toolkit for understanding evolutionary processes, particularly understanding the evolution of the diversity of animal life. But of course that can be applied to lots of other questions in science as well. The toolkit that we give you is going to be focused on zoology, but has broad applicability to a whole range of other scientific questions as well. Specifically, from the point of view of understanding zoology, we'll be thinking about ecology, for example. So we'll study the essentials of ecology, which is important for understanding how animals interact with each other and interact with the environment. We'll study animal behavior, so looking in much more detail at exactly how animals have evolved particular behaviors, what the costs of those behaviors are, how those behaviors are influenced by the behavior of other individuals, for example. We'll look at the anatomy of animals. How do we tell different groups apart by their anatomy? What specialized features have they evolved that allow us to identify them as a particular species or higher taxonomic group? But also, what are those adaptations, those anatomical adaptations that allow them to perform well in their environment that they find themselves in? We'll look at physiology, so internal processes inside the organism. We'll talk about genetics, so relatedness between individuals, how genes are passed on and what those genes do. Taxonomy, so understanding in more detail how different groups of animals are related to each other. And underpinning all of this is evolution, so we'll learn the basics of evolutionary biology as well. And this will give us an understanding of how organisms, populations, species, communities, and ecosystems, so all different levels of organization across across life function, and how those processes have evolved over time. You'll learn lots of valuable skills and techniques which will be really useful for answering these questions, but as I say, can also be applied to lots of other situations as well. We really emphasize hands-on research experience at Plymouth, so you'll get lots of opportunities to perform experiments, to design your own research, not only in your final year research project, but in several other modules as well. And this gives you really good grounding for whatever you want to do next, whether that's going straight into employment, which we'll talk about potential careers in a minute, or if you want to study zoology further at postgraduate level, it sets you up really well for a further postgraduate study at master's or PhD level. So these are the kinds of careers that zoology students go into, and we haven't got any zoology graduates yet, but we have graduates from other degree programs at Plymouth that have gone on to these kinds of careers as well. So all of us who did zoology degrees at Plymouth have ended up in academic research jobs, and many of our students go on to do academic research as well. We'll give you the skills to do research that's based in the field or in the lab, and there are academics that do both of those things at Plymouth. Students go on to work in conservation and wildlife management. They go on to work in consultancy and policy. And if you're thinking about policy, you can work potentially for government agencies or for non-governmental organisations as well, and students from Plymouth have done both of those things in the past. Museums always want to employ people who know a lot about the evolution and diversity, and particularly the taxonomy of animals, so careers in museums are definitely a strong possibility. Some of our graduates have gone on to work in ecotourism abroad. Students have gone to work in veterinary sciences, and although I said that zoology is not really about zoos, some of our students go to work in zoos and sanctuaries as well. But of course, any science-related career will be something that you can consider after a zoology degree because, as I said earlier on, the skills, the toolkit that we give you is applicable to all sorts of scientific topics, not just zoology. So why would you want to come to Plymouth? Well, there are lots of reasons. Plymouth's a great place to live and study. One of the specific things that's relatively unusual about Plymouth is it's got a Royal Society of Biology accreditation for our degree programs in the biological part of the School of Biological and Marine Sciences. Our other 3 degree programs are already accredited, and as soon as our first students start on the zoology course this year, that course will also be accredited. So that means that the Royal Society of Biology has checked out the skills that we deliver and teach to our students and the knowledge that they learn over the period of their study here, and has signed it off as being appropriate for the kind of level that you would expect a qualified zoologist to have. And you can say that you've graduated with a degree that's been accredited by the Royal Society of Biology. Plymouth has a nice mix, or this degree, the zoology degree, has a nice mix of hands-on skills. So we do lots of things in the field and in the lab, but also lots of theory. We really emphasize, as I've said, research experience, so you'll get plenty of opportunities to do your own research and to join in with the research that academics are doing. And one of the other really important focuses that we have here at Plymouth is on employability. And embedded throughout our degree program are lots of workshops and skills development sessions aimed at making sure that our students have a high chance of obtaining the kind of employment they want at the end of their degrees. You'll get access and support from skilled specialists from a whole range of different fields. Some of our staff are shown there on the right that will be teaching you. All of those are active in research, but also very enthusiastic and engaged teachers and really experienced student mentors as well. And that means you've got a very supportive academic environment. Plymouth, I think, can rightly be proud of how supportive the academic staff are of the students that study here. But the university community at Plymouth in general is also a very supportive environment to come and study in. And as I started off by saying, it's just a great place to live and study. So I'll just tell you a little bit more about the exact modules that we'll be studying in each of the 3 years of the degree. I won't go into these in much detail because you can look up more information on the website for the degree program, which has got a link down here. But I'll just give you a quick flavour. So the first thing you'll do is an introduction to zoology module. That starts with an intensive couple of weeks and then continues out throughout the semester. And there we'll be doing some basic training in some of the skills that you'll need, not only for first year, but throughout your degree. So we'll spend a bit of time in lectures, but quite a lot of time in the lab and in workshops and in the field, developing zoology-specific skills that will really set the groundwork for what you're going to be doing for the rest of your degree and potentially for the rest of your career. We've got 4 modules that are core biological sciences degree topics. This is to make sure that everybody has a really good grounding in key biological concepts. Some of this you may have covered to some extent before, but it's unlikely that you will have covered it in the depth and level of detail that we'll cover it here. So we've got a module on cell biology, a module on ecology and biodiversity, a module on basic physiology, and a module on evolution and behaviour. Then we've got a behaviour and ecology field course. So this is your first year field course that you do as the first residential field course as part of your degree, which I'll come back to in a second. And then we've got this 0 credit module here. So it's 0 credit, it doesn't carry any marks towards, or the marks for it don't count towards your final degree grade. And this is really a holding place for keeping track of all of the skills that you develop during your first year, mainly through the modules that you do, but also through some extracurricular activities. This is part of this is a continuous professional development idea where we're keeping track of all of the activities that you do. So keeping a record of all of the activities you do in lots of different areas that will help to build a really strong CV for you in the future, so you can demonstrate activity in lots of different areas. It also keeps track of the specific skills that we sign you off for in each of the different modules, and you've got a list of all of the skills that you've been signed off as being competent in, and again that helps with your CV towards the end of your degree. When you start thinking about jobs, you've got a really solid basis for listing and evidencing skills that you've developed in your first year, and we do the same thing again in second year. So the first year field course is to Slapton Lee, which is not very far away from Plymouth, just down the road in Devon. Beautiful place to go and do biology. We've been going there for several years with two of our other degree programs. You can see the Lee itself here. So this is a freshwater lake which is separated from Start Bay by this bit of shingle there, which keeps the fresh water away from the sea. So we've got beach, we've got freshwater lake. There's various patches of woodland. So there's a big patch of woodland there, and there's another one behind where this photo is taken. Obviously, we've got loads of farmland. The field station that we stay at and where we have our labs is just down here somewhere, and a little bit over there is the village, which is a beautiful old village with lots of lovely things to look at, and two very nice pubs which we're likely to frequent on one or two evenings. So it's a fantastic place to study. And we do lots of things there, which I won't go through now, but we learn about birds, we learn about invertebrates, we do things in the lab. Students do a research project in the last couple of days at Slapton, which they design themselves and then conduct as a group. I've got a photo here of a bloody-nosed beetle larva because some students did a project looking at foraging behaviour in bloody-nosed beetles a year or two ago. So it's a really fun but also really good training experience for students. And one of the best things about field courses is it's a really great opportunity for students to get to know each other much better, because you spend a week together living in the same place, spending all day in the field together, and also the staff and students get to know each other much better as well. And by the end of the field course, we have a really nice cohesive group of students, and a much more relaxed and supportive atmosphere between staff and students tends to develop as well. So in the second year, we do much more specific zoology related study. There's a comparative zoology module, which is about understanding the differences between different taxonomic groups of animals. There's a methods module where we develop zoology specific methods to a much higher level, things like statistics, understanding how to do molecular analysis, so extracting DNA and using that DNA to answer questions like, for example, to identify species. Module on animal behavior, which is a much more in-depth module looking at animal behavior in a whole range of different contexts. An ecophysiology module, so looking at the physiology of animals in relation to their interactions with the environment. The second year field course, which I'll come back to, and another one of these professional development modules which keeps track of the skills that you're developing during your second year. You have an option in the second year as well. You can choose to go down a more conservation focused route and do principles of conservation biology, or you can develop an interest that you might have in marine biology by doing the biology of marine organisms. So the second year field course is to Kenya. Kenya is here in East Africa. The nature reserve we go to is Impala in the middle of Kenya here. Fantastic location. You can see at the top left here one of the huts that is the accommodation that we would be staying in, overlooking a river, and of course we can expect to see some pretty interesting animals coming down to the river to drink. Lots of interesting habitats to look at. We also have access to some really nice labs. Lots of other universities have students going to this field centre as well. It's really well equipped for all sorts of different things that we'll be interested in. And you can expect to see lots of interesting big megafauna animals, as you would always expect to see, I'm sure, in Kenya. But we'll be looking at other things as well. There's lots of fascinating bird life there, lots of invertebrates. It's an opportunity to put those skills that you developed in first year into use in a more exotic, more challenging, and maybe for many people more exciting environment. At the end of second year, if you choose to, you can go on a placement year. This is a year where you suspend your studies for a year and go off and do something else to get experience in the workplace. We can help you with that, so you'll get help both from the staff in the school and from a dedicated placements team in the university to find a suitable position and to apply for that position. There's lots of places that we've sent students to in the past, and we send students to them regularly year after year. So it's always possible to go to a place that we've already identified and have an ongoing relationship with. But most years, students find their own places that they want to go to as well, and we can help you to develop that contact and turn it into a suitable thing for you to do for your placement. During the time that you're on placement, you'll have academic support, so you'll be assigned a placement tutor who will be in regular contact with you while you're on placement, and we'll also be in touch with your placement provider to make sure that everything is going smoothly while you're away from Plymouth. We've been doing this for at least 15 years, so we've got lots of experience in sending students on placement, and it has a really high take-up across our degree programs. We send many students every year off on placement year. The minimum requirement is that you do 6 months of placement. That can be one lot of 6 months or 2 lots of 3 months, but you can do more than that. Some students do a full year in one place, some students do 2 6-month placements, and so on. As long as you do that minimum 6 months, then you fulfill the requirements for the honours degree with placement year. There's global possibilities. People do actually stay in Plymouth and do work with researchers in Plymouth if that's what interests them, but people often go overseas and do all sorts of exciting things in lots of different countries. So a local example is that we've had students go and work with raptors at the Devon Bird of Prey Centre. We've had students go to the Natural History Museum in London and learn about taxonomy and curation of museum specimens, which is a really specialist and very useful skill to learn. We've had students go to Africa, so last year a student went to Malawi to study hyena behaviour, and we've done other things like, for example, students going to Grenada to look at turtles and their nesting ecology. So that's entirely optional, but if you want to do it, that is an option that's available at Plymouth and that we have a lot of experience providing. Your final year is, for most students, dominated by the final year research project. That's a 40 credit module that lasts the whole of the academic year. You'll choose a project either from a list provided by staff, or you can come up with a project on your own and develop that with a staff member that's relevant to your interests. And you do some research either in the field or in the lab, or in some cases a desk-based project, for example, looking at mathematical modelling or computer modelling. And then you write that up as a dissertation, which is submitted in about March or April the following year. There's an interesting module that's unique to Plymouth called Advanced Skills and Concepts, and this is a module that houses 3 short intensive courses that are providing specialist training that's really focused on employability related skills. For the zoology degree program, we're still thinking about this and discussing what would be useful with students. But for example, in the other degree programs, conservation biology has an intensive module on geographic information systems. We have an intensive module on data analysis using R, for example. We have an intensive course on invertebrate natural history and taxonomy. And that's a flavour of the types of things that we offer. They run for 4 weeks. You have 1 full day per week for 4 weeks. And it's really hands-on, really intensive, and you really develop one of those skills or concepts to a very high level, and you get to do that 3 times over the course of that module. So that allows you to apply for jobs and say that you have a high degree of competency in this really employability-related field. There's one core academic module, which is speciation and diversity. That's taught by our colleagues in marine biology, so that's why it's got a different prefix, MBio. And so you'll be learning along with some of your marine biology colleagues in that module. And then there are various options as well. 3 of these are also taught by the marine biology team: behavioural ecology, fish and fisheries, and conservation biology. And taught by the biology academic team, we've got global change biology, which is about conservation, and animal welfare and ethics. So you've got quite a lot of choice there, and you can choose 2 of those modules to make up your final 40 credits. I won't talk at length about the final year research project, and I won't go through each of these in detail, but here's an example of some of the things that students have done in the past. Quite a range of different types of things. Some of them have been local in Plymouth, slightly further afield in the New Forest, but people have also done their work overseas, for example, in the Philippines and in Vietnam. And we've got a range of things from laboratory-based work, so the top one there, the effective pesticides, is a laboratory-based project, to field-based projects, and also questionnaire-based projects. Public's attitude, awareness and knowledge is based on collecting information through questionnaires. So there's a whole range of different types of project that you can do, and we've got a lot of academic staff with expertise in zoology at Plymouth. You're bound to find somebody that's offering a project that's right up your street. And it's not all about study, of course. There's lots of extracurricular things you can do at Plymouth, as there are at all of the big universities, of course. We've got lots of clubs, societies, sports teams, all of that sort of thing you would expect to find. There's always lots of events going on, social events, academic-related events and so on. Lots of visiting speakers, and the School of Biological and Marine Sciences hosts a number of quite high-profile speaking events, which you'll learn more about on the website if you're interested. You can get useful work experience as well, and you can do some of that through the university. For example, if you were able to come to Plymouth today for the open day, you would be meeting lots of student ambassadors. They're getting useful work experience and they're getting paid, as well as being current students that can explain to potential incoming students what it's like to study at Plymouth. And there's a really great social atmosphere on campus. There's a student union right in the middle of the campus, and particularly on a hot summer's day, there'll be lots of students crowded around, enjoying themselves, doing all sorts of fun social things. And off campus, Plymouth has got a thriving social scene as well. Plymouth's got a really supportive learning environment, and I think that's something I emphasised a few minutes ago, but it's one of the things that we're very proud of and lots of our students are very positive about. You get a personal tutor as soon as you arrive at Plymouth. You'll meet them on your first day of academic term here. They would normally be your first port of call if you had any questions or problems. They'll give you academic support, but also personal support. Regular tutorials with your tutor happen throughout the first and second year, and they normally happen as a small group to develop the core skills that you're learning about in lectures. But you also have regular one-to-one meetings each semester where you can talk about things in more detail, your progress, any concerns that you have, and so on. By the end of the 3 years, you'll know your tutor very well, and they'll know you very well as well. And that's a really good person to have as a contact, somebody who can write you a reference, and just somebody that you know is a friendly face who you can always talk to about anything that's concerning you. There's lots of university-wide support services as well, of course. We've got a disability services team, a learning development team, a careers service. We've got a service called Sum Up, which is run by mathematicians for help with anyone struggling with mathematical aspects. We've got a writing cafe to help students develop their writing skills, and so on. So the support services at the broader university level are really strong as well. If you do decide you want to come to Plymouth, what do you need to do, or what sort of qualifications do you need to come? We expect you to have a biology A level and a second science, and both of those should be to grade C level or above. Typically our offer is 120 points, depending to some extent on the subjects studied. We will accept other qualifications as well, so BTEC and international qualifications, but that depends to some extent on the subject studied. And if you've got any questions about that, the best thing to do is to drop an email to the admissions team or directly to our school's admissions tutor, who is Sarah Collins, and her email address is there. You can find more information about application and entry requirements on the website, but do feel free to drop Sarah an email if you're confused or uncertain about whether you have the correct qualifications. What do we want from you then? Well, we're looking for curious people, really. Curious, motivated, committed students. We want you to be as enthusiastic about learning about the world around you as all of the staff here are. We not only teach zoology, but we spend a lot of our spare time being fascinated by the world around us and study animals and plants as a hobby, as well as our core research interest. And we're looking for people who are as enthusiastic about the world around them as we are, and as curious and motivated to learn about it as we feel ourselves. So if you think that's you, please apply, and we'd love to see you here next year. If you have any more questions, please do drop me an email. That's my email address here. I'd always be very happy to hear from you and answer any questions that you might have about the degree. And thank you very much for listening. Hope to see you here next year.